Where does all of the evil proceed? When you look around the world and you see some of the things, I cannot even begin to block out everything that I don't want to see. When I look at all the evil in the world, the things that people do to each other, and they love to video these things now and post all this stuff where people get hurt, killed, maimed, run over by trains, crashes. I mean, it's a phenomenon that's unbelievable. It's right in your face, and it's almost more than we can handle. Where does the idea come from to commit such heinous crimes and robbery and, murders? And, we, of course, saw this assassination of Charlie Kirk and how awful it is. And, I said one shot changed the world. It's kind of like what we saw or what we didn't see, but what the world experienced in World War I, where a 19-year-old shot, the Archduke Ferdinand, him and his wife both in an open car there, and in Serbia. And of course, Austria and Serbia went to war, and they were backed by the Russians and the Germans. And World War I broke out, and it cost 15 to 22 million lives. One shot. Historians use that as the shot that started the whole war. And here we are in our world today, in our country here today, that one shot has polarized the parties. And I mean, it looks like one is coalescing together. It seems that the right is very much coalescing together. But there's a lot of boldness now. I hear people get on the radio and come on these talk show hosts, and they make bold statements about Christianity, about Jesus Christ. And on the other hand, it looks like the other side is imploding or exploding, or I don't know if they're coalescing together, but there's a lot of mayhem within both parties, I guess, to some degree. But who perpetrates all of these heinous crimes of, looting and gang violence, oppression, cruelty toward other human beings that they don't even know? And as a result of pride and covetousness, usually, the vanity and the hatred that belongs to corporate America. When they have a football game or a soccer game, people will kill one another after the game's over with. They will turn over cars, burn the city down if their home team loses. And they don't like the way things went in a ball game. I mean, that's the world in which we live. The diabolical acts of human beings even reach the level of government. Mark commented on that, and I'm glad he did. And I bet there are people up there in high levels that were making bold statements. And, the Bible says, pride comes before a fall. I think that's literally happened in people that were standing up there several years ago. I could almost bear to listen to some of the trials and some of these lawyers and judges on top of that making the statements that they were making. And I think to some degree they're being judged for that now. The media is another one that I think that there are terrible things that have happened in our media that aren't being covered. They're subdued. They're not being reported properly. And, of course, you guys are all aware of that. And our education systems, our schools. At least Charlie Kirk was going out there in the battlefield. And you talk about walking into a den of lions and taking on the institutions of our country who are poisoning the minds of our children against anything that has to do with God or creation. And they've been doing it for years. I mean, I was in college 40 years ago, and that was the first thing the professor said to me in my zoology class. Now, I know a bunch of you are religious, but we're not here to discuss religion. We're here to talk about science. And he began to tell us how the very first thing that existed was the atom, and how it exploded, and how the earth was formed out of this wild mass of disarray. And as it began to cool, that's what he would tell us. You've got to put this out of your mind, this religious business of creation. Because the earth was this giant heated orb out here in space. And think about it, the chances over time, over this cooling process, that up and down the temperatures went, and as it cooled from 700 degrees centigrade all the way down to 32 degrees or whatever it was, the bottom number there, at some point in that whole cooling process, it may have taken millions of years, there was the perfect temperature that it would arrive in this happenstance of lightning strike and these amino acids in this pool of water. They don't tell you where the water came from or where the amino acids came from. Life began. And that's where we started. The whole training process, and that's what's polluting the minds of our young people. And they come out of these colleges, they have no concept of God. They think all of that is, was fireside tales, and that the Bible. I've actually heard people that Bill Maher the other night said the Bible is, it's a bunch of hate, it's a bunch of evil, it's a bunch of, there's nothing true about the Bible. It's just fireside tales. One thing I do like about Bill Maher, not that I watch him, is that he had Charlie Kirk on his program, and he actually said, I will not celebrate the death or an assassination of someone who sat right here in this chair and was willing to have a debate with me. I like that about what he said. Even though he doesn't believe in God, he doesn't believe in creation, he doesn't believe in the Bible or anything else, and he thinks all of it's, is a waste of time. But he at least said he had invited the left on his show many, many times, and they won't come because they're afraid they'll be exposed for what they truly are. He said at least the right will come on my show and take their beating like a man. I mean, that's his words. At least he gave the right the credit for at least showing up and telling them our stance or their stance, whoever it might have been there. And Charlie Kirk was one of those, and he admired him for his courage. And I don't understand why other people wouldn't do that as well. So along with the media and the education center, it seems that this violence and this move towards hatred is fast growing. And it almost seems as though our acquisition of knowledge increases that. Along with our increase of knowledge appears to be the capacity for greater and more fiendish and unholy acts which are perpetrated by mankind. The smarter we get, the more we figure out how to blow each other up. Isn't that wonderful? What a wonderful world we live. Who was it that sang that song? Was it the trumpet player? Louis Armstrong. What a wonderful world it would be. I think it was the name. What a wonderful world. Something like that. It was such a beautiful song. He looked out at the park and the streets and the sky, and he said, what a wonderful world. Sometime I look out and I don't have those thoughts. I do when I'm looking out my backyard. And I look at the animals and the plants and the trees and the grass and the sky. I drove down this week and came over a hill, and that sun was coming up over the horizon, and it looked like it was about 4 times its normal size. There was a cloud right through the top of it, and it looked like it came out of some sort of photography magazine. It was perfect. I was scrambling for my phone and stopped at a red light, and by the time I got my phone, it was over. I mean, it was gone that quick. That vision, that picture that God allowed me to see in 1 second of time was gone. And my heart leapt. And then the other day I was driving home from work, and there's one of these big old thunderstorms rolling up. And these clouds were coming up high into the sky, boiling up 30, 40,000 feet. And there was clouds in front of it, and this cloud in the back kind of overrolled and kind of like mushroomed over the front, those clouds that were farther back. And the sun was casting a shadow from this cloud over onto those clouds. And it looked so majestic, I just burst out, just praise God the Almighty, the King of all creation. Praise your holy, righteous name. I mean, this came out of me. I couldn't help it because there's a cloud that's 1,000,000 times bigger than I am, a cloud. And I haven't begun to talk about how gracious and glorious and powerful and mighty and strong and loving and kind and forgiving God is. I can't even approach him because of his glory, his might, his strength, his power, his light, his life, everything about him that is good. Love, he inhabits love. He embodies love. He embodies light. He is the creator of life. He's bigger than I am. He's my boss, and he's my creator. And I can't describe a world in which he would possess, would live, reign. I just don't know how to describe that. In the world that is so bent on self-destruction, where would one go to find the voice of reason? I'm talking to people out here in the world now. I mean, you want to find the truth. You want to find understanding. You want to find, where do you go? Do you go listen to a man? Certainly don't come to me. I'm a man. I'm fallible. I'm not perfect. I don't have all the truth. I don't know everything. But people will go to some man and they will lay all of their cards on the table and put all their money and they bet on that one man's instruction, advice, whether it be a college professor, somebody in academia, somebody in politics, somebody in a professional career. And they'll put all their money on, the win with that one person. And I tell you, that is a recipe for disaster. Where do you go to find the voice of reason? Where do you trust? Who do you trust to give us the right answer to the problems that we face, the solutions that would address the ongoing problems we have in our world? Do we go to the extreme left? Do we just accept Marxism and communism and socialism? Do we just accept it and say, okay, wouldn't the world be wonderful if we could just all accept that form of government, which people are fighting every day to move in that direction? Or perhaps do we go to fascism, the nationalistic and anti-democratic, anti-Semitic party of extreme right? That's what Adolf Hitler did. The far right, the extreme right. I heard this morning that there was a guy in Germany, a shopkeeper, that put up a sign that says, "No Jews allowed." You talk about a firestorm. You talk about throwing gasoline on a 80-year-old fire that's been smoldering for all this time. That is like taking a shovel and turning up something that is trying to be buried and softly dealt with. But to put a sign up in a shop like that in Germany, you talk about fomenting hatred, fomenting, decades-old emotions. I think both of these have proven to be disastrous, haven't they? Both of these forms of government. And the nations which embraced them, their ideology and their philosophy, of course. Excuse me. So where is the common ground? Most people agree, I think, that there are forces out there that are good and evil. Whether you believe in ancient mythology or some pagan religion, or the observance of spiritualism, or whether it's Judaism or Christianity, most people, even that don't have any knowledge of any of these things, have the idea of good and evil. The forces, whether they're playing a video game, for pity's sake, that there is good and evil. And where do they come from? And where do you find out? They believe in these forces that drive people and nations and societies, I believe, as a whole, and often bring them to the brink of destruction. History certainly tells us that. If you ever read anything about history, the nations that will absolutely bring themselves down to destruction in order to try to hang on to power for one more moment. Then why is it so hard to believe that the Bible, which is a moral code, which explains the origin of man, by the way, you can go back to the very beginning and read where man came from. They cannot wait till they find an ounce of water on Mars so they can prove that Mars is going to someday be an Earth like ours, or was in the past, or that's how our Earth came to be. That gives the reason for the existence of man. Why are you walking around on this earth? Why do you go through all the problems that you have? Why do you have to endure some of the things you endure? And where are you going with your life? What is your ultimate end game here? Have you ever thought about that? Most people can't even tell themselves what they want to be, where they want to be in 5 years. What do you want to be doing? What occupation would make me the happiest? What hobbies would give me fulfillment and joy and happiness in my life? Because they're so buried in what the world has created when it comes to jobs and security and finances and credit and all of those things. But also the Bible describes the downfall of man and the reasons why that they have fallen. But what I don't understand is, why won't people ever look at the Bible? They will dismiss it. They will argue against it. They'll say it doesn't exist. They'll say that it's false. It's fireside tales, as I said. But people will believe anything that you tell them, but they won't believe the Bible. That's fascinating to me. They will believe some old scroll that they found in an ancient Egyptian tomb, and they'll say, wow, look at this. This predicts the future. But You give them a Bible that's been here, that's been traced down through our history, and we can prove that it's been here for millennia, that pieces of it have been assembled together over time with the same thread running through them, the thread of the hope and the salvation and the plan of God for mankind, and they won't believe it. They won't read it. They won't look at it. They won't examine it. If then, wouldn't you want to just at least take a look? For historical reference. Wouldn't you want to at least read it? And they will try to read some of these ancient scrolls. They'll try to reach they've accomplished reading demonic. They've accomplished reading Egyptian hieroglyphic. They've accomplished reading the Greek text that go all the way back to Jesus' time and before and others. But to read the Bible, you would think that you would want to know if there's any knowledge in there on how to address the mounting problems we have in our world. And no man will do it. They will reject it. But I want to submit to you that if the Bible is factual, is it possible that it could be factual? When you look at it, when you really just think about how in the world a book managed to come down to us after thousands of years that has actually inspired many nations, that has been the cornerstone of documents such as the Magna Carta and the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights and our Declaration of Independence, and inspired great men of our history. Wouldn't you want to at least take a look at it? If it is inspired and it was transferred down to our age by a divine hand, the divine hand of our Creator God, I believe, then it must be read and understood. It must be. Someone has to read it. And if we are ever to solve the problems of this world, or at least know that there is a solution forthcoming, we may not solve all the problems of the world, and we probably and most likely won't. But I can tell you there is a solution coming to the problems that we have. In Genesis, the first chapter, or the third chapter, I should say, I wanted to go back here to the beginning of this document here, just read a little bit of this story here, Genesis 3 and verse 1. Now the serpent was more subtle than the beast of the field, and the Lord had made. And he said unto the woman, Has God said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? Now, the way Satan does this, he comes along and he tells the woman, he doesn't say to the woman, Look at all of this fabulous wealth which you can partake. You can have, you mean to tell me you can eat of everything in this garden? No, he points out the one thing that God says don't eat. And he really magnifies that and makes it like, oh, God didn't tell you that you couldn't eat of that thing. So what was he saying here? God has restricted your freedom of choice. Oh, wow. I can't have anybody telling me what to do. Nobody's going to tell me how to choose, how to live, how to impose laws, demand my obedience, or insist on me being some sort of a subordinate. And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the tree of the garden, all the trees of the fruit of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God said, You shall not eat thereof, a command God made. Neither shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said unto the woman, You shall not surely die. Another lie that's been perpetrated or reported down through the history of mankind, that you're not going to die. You've got an immortal soul. For God does not know the day that you eat therein. Your eyes will be opened, and you shall be like gods. God's holding something back from you, and you have the right to obtain it. And knowing good and evil, you're going to be like God if you do that. And when the woman saw the tree was good for food, and it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree to be desired, before that tree was not even in her thoughts. And now all of a sudden you can't do it. All of a sudden, it's everything she wanted. All the other trees weren't good enough. To make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat it, and gave also to her husband with her, and he did eat. You know, a lot of people make jokes down through the years that it was Eve's fault. She's the one that brought down man, and guys sat around and drank beer and talked about that my whole life. It's the girl's fault. She's the one that she's the one that did it. She's the one that ate. But guess what? She was deceived. The salesman put a move on her and made her desire something and sort of used her own characteristics against her. But the man, he ate it willingly. He wasn't deceived, was he? He just blatantly ate it. So, guys, we're without excuse. I'm sorry. We're without excuse. He just ate it because she said it's okay to eat it. And the eyes of them were open, and they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. So now all of a sudden the shame comes along, and there's this, I guess, guilt of doing something you weren't supposed to do, and they knew that God was going to be angry, so now they're trying to hide. Just like any kid that does something wrong, they will run to the back room and get under the bed and hope mom and dad don't find me when I did something wrong. And anyway, God, of course, came along and said, who told you you were naked? And, of course, that brought about the very first sin there in the Garden of Eden, man disobeying God. We know what happened after that, too, when Cain slew Abel. There was a bitter hatred and jealousy one above the other. And there was the first murder while our first parents were there in the Garden of Eden that was perpetrated. And all of this because of Satan's influence there in the world and right there in the Garden of Eden. In Isaiah, I want to go over now to Isaiah the 14th chapter because this gives a little bit of description of what happened to Satan and how he came to be. Isaiah the 14th chapter. My whole point of this is to describe to you and to define where evil actually comes from. The purpose, the reason, where it originates. In chapter 14 of Isaiah, I want to go down into chapter 14, verse 12. It says, how are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Lucifer was the name of Satan before he became Satan the devil. He was there in the garden of God. He was there in the very temple of God up in heaven where God dwells. And his name was Lucifer, which means light bringer. And he said, son of the morning, how are you cut down to the ground? You did weaken the nations. Everywhere Satan goes, he weakens nations. For thou hast said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, and I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. There's his motivation. He wants to be in charge. And I will sit up on the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. Some description there of where God's throne is and where it's positioned in the universe. It's called the sides of the north. I think in the book of Psalms, it actually talks about that in Psalm 48. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High God. I will just be God myself. I will take his position. That's his motivation. And it also is the same motivation which inspires men today. They want it all. They want to be in charge. They don't want just a business that's making a profit. They want to own all of it in the whole world. They want to have their product and no competition whatsoever. They want to eliminate every competition that there's out there. Yet you shall be brought down to hell or Sheol or the grave, to the sides of the pit, and they that see thee shall narrowly look upon you and consider, is this the man that made the earth to tremble? And of course, that's a reference there to the ultimate manifestation of a man that's going to be possessed, I believe, by Satan the devil in the book, as the book of Revelation describes. This beast power that is going to be ruled over by a man, and he is going to be possessed of Satan the devil, and eventually God is going to take him and throw him into the lake of fire, is actually what it says. And they're going to look on him and say, is this the guy that absolutely turned the world upside down? It's sort of a prophecy about him. The other one was in Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, I believe that's right. Ezekiel 28. Is another reference here, a description of Satan the devil. And it sort of gives you a little clue as to where he came from. This one we just read is about his origins. But look in Ezekiel the 28th chapter and verse 13. It says, you have been in Eden, the garden of God. So he was right there in the very beginning. Every precious stone was your covering, the sardius, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, the carbuncle, and the gold, and the workmanship of your tabrets or your timbrels and of your pipes was prepared in thee in the day that you were created. A lot of commentaries say that this not only was he arrayed in all these fine jewelry, just glittering beauty that just would, no wonder Eve looked at him and thought, wow, that's a handsome salesman. And she invited him in, I guess. He had his foot in the door, and she didn't try to shut the door. He was magnetic. Had a great personality, beautiful teeth, smile, glittering. And it says these pipes and tabrets, some of the commentaries think that he may have been able to produce music beyond anybody's wildest imagination and influence people. Does music influence people today? Man, I wish I could go back in high school and tell all the people that listened to some of that junk we listened to back in high school to turn it off. What it did to us, what it did to them, the music. He says, you are the anointed cherub that covereth. I have set thee so. You were in the holy mountain of God. You have walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Of course, Isaiah talked about that, what he saw in vision. You were perfect in thy ways from the day that you were created. So God created him, till iniquity was found in you. So here's the angelic realm that was created in this very high position that still had the choice to choose between good and evil. And what did he choose? He became self-centered. He became, full of himself. He decided, I'm more entitled to be in God's position than God himself. By the multitude of your merchandise, you have filled the midst of thee with violence. I ask you where the violence comes from. And as sin, therefore I will cast you as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Jesus said, I beheld Satan as lightning being cast down from heaven. He saw that. He witnessed that moment. And it's sort of hard to understand, but we know that in the book of Job that God had allowed all the angels to come and present themselves before him, as I was talking the other week about this. And Satan was among them. And God allowed Satan to go out and test Job. It's interesting that Satan wanted to see if there was anything in Job that disqualified him as being a follower of God, didn't he? He was really eager to do that. He said, your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. So success, pride, vanity, beauty, all of the things that I have that make me such a wonderful person, that lifted him up, self-righteousness, whatever you want to call it. Thou hast corrupted the wisdom by reason of your brightness, and I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings that they may behold you. And of course, you can go about and read that in Revelation, the 20th chapter, where it says he's going to bind Satan for 1,000 years and take him out of the way, in other words. In Zechariah, the 3rd chapter, here's one I like to read because it can also not only happen in the world, in the business world, in vanity magazines, or in people that take pictures of themselves and think their beauty's going to last forever. You can go back and look at some of the movie stars from 80 years ago, and you realize it doesn't last forever. I was looking at a picture of Edie. What was her name? Edie. I can't remember her name. She was fabulous. She was an Austrian girl, Jewish girl, beautiful. Edie Lamar. She was a beautiful lady. She escaped Nazi Germany, and she was her husband was actually a businessman in Austria when the Germans annexed Austria. She fled to London, where she met some of the movies people, and they I think it was Mayer or Goldwyn? I don't remember. One of the movie directors cast her, and he said she was the most beautiful woman in the world. And she was. But eventually she got old, and this beauty wasn't there. She was fabulous. She had a beautiful mind. She was wise. She had an incredible IQ, and went on to do great things besides the movie industry. But at one point in time she was beautiful, and then I guess age takes over, doesn't it? I want to read Zechariah, the 3rd chapter, in verse 1. It says here, and he showed me Joshua, the high priest. What I was going to say is, not only in business, not only in the movie industry, not only in the modeling agency, whatever you are at, there is influence in your line of work, or in your business, or in work, or in play, wherever it is. But it's also in religion. There's the influence there. Look at this. He showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. Now, I don't want Satan to be at my right hand. to resist me. You remember there's one occasion where Jesus told Peter, Satan wants to have you and sift you as wheat. I pray that never happens to me. I hope it never happens to any of us. I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to go through what Job went through, the loss of all of his family, the loss of all of his possessions. I mean, down to the ground while he's groveling on the ground and his whole body is covered with boils, and he's in such agony that he says, I don't know why you made me born, but I'm not going to. And his wife came out and said, why don't you just go ahead and curse God and die? It'll at least give you some comfort. And yet in it all, he saw through it somehow. I don't know how the man had the strength to do it, the loss that he had. It's hard to go from the top to the bottom. It's easy to go from the bottom up. I've learned that in my life. I think some of the movie stars have too. They've gotten these wealth, and some great athletes have got $1 million contracts, and then they blow a knee out, and all of a sudden the money's gone, and all the advertisers are gone, and pretty soon they're selling tacos down at the Taco Shack. And it's hard, very difficult. How does it feel to be once this great superstar, and now you're just a nobody? Oh, it feels wonderful. Why'd you ask, But to be pulled down by Satan. He's standing at his right hand to resist him. And the Lord said unto Satan, the Lord rebuke thee, O Satan, even the Lord that has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is not this the brand plucked out of the fire? And Joshua was clothed with filthy garments and stood before the angel. So he even too had sin in his life, and even in the position that he had. And he answered and spake unto those that stood by him, saying, take away the filthy garments from him. And unto him he said, behold, I have caused your iniquity to pass from you, and I will clothe you with a change of raiment. God does that to us through Jesus Christ. He makes us right in his eyes because of the sacrifice that Jesus made and the blood that he shed. And he said, let them set a fair mitre upon his head. So they set a fair mitre upon his head and clothed him with the garments, and the angel of the Lord stood by. And the angel of the Lord protested unto Joshua, saying, thus says the Lord of hosts, if you will walk in my ways. Now this is what I was talking about here. This is why I want people to actually sit down and read what the Bible says. If you will walk in my ways and you will keep my charge, then you shall also judge my house and shall also keep my courts. And I will give you places to walk in among these that stand by, among the very angels of God, the spiritual world, the spiritual realm of God's family. And he says, now hear, O Joshua, high priest, thou and the fellows that sit before you, for they are men wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch. And of course, this is a reference here to Jesus Christ, that he would come and he would save the world from his sins. But he would ultimately come back and solve the problems that we have in this world as well. For behold, the stone that I have laid before Joshua, upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. The Bible talks about Jesus having 7 eyes that go out to all the earth. I mean, he talks about the 7 churches there in the first, second, and third chapters of the book of Revelation, that God's eyes went to all of these churches. He knew exactly what was going on in each of them. Behold, I will engrave the gravings thereon, says the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day. Of course, that's exactly what happened when Jesus died there on the stake. Those that believe and trust in him, their iniquities are wiped away, and it's not a more beautiful sight. Matthew the 13th chapter, I want to quickly go here to Matthew the 13th chapter. I'm running out of time here. Chapter 4. No, let's go to chapter 4 and verse 1 is the first one here. There's a couple here. I may have to quote some of these to you, but Matthew the 4th chapter and verse 1. And Jesus was led up in the spirit of the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. Jesus elected to go. He was led by the Spirit to go out in the wilderness and fast 40 days and 40 nights. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, afterward he was hungry. That's the understatement of all history, I would think. And when the tempter came to him, he said, if you be the Son of God, notice that, he commanded these stones be made bread. One of my favorite scriptures here. And he answered, Jesus said, it is written, and I want to tell those that have not read the Bible, Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. One of the most profound. That means Deuteronomy, the 30th chapter, Deuteronomy, the 8th chapter, Deuteronomy 26, all of the book of Leviticus, where it talks about his statutes, his laws, his judgments, his commandments. You know, Deuteronomy, the 5th chapter, Leviticus 23, the ones that have to do with the holy days and the Sabbath day as well. Just over and over again, the words of God that are there. And the devil takes him up in the holy place and sits him on the pinnacle of the temple and says, if you be the Son of God. There it is. Again, you know, you're not really the Son of God, you know. Cast yourself down, and he shall give his angels charge concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time you should dash your foot against a stone. You know, if you go back and read that in the book of Psalms, it says, lest you dash your foot. You don't go out there and try to kick a rock and hope God's going to heal you or protect you from being wounded. It's in case something happens to you. And I can tell you in my family, there are several instances where God intervened. I'll tell you a story. I was out on a well this week, and I've been working on this well for about 3 days and getting up late at night, going out there early in the morning, staying half the night, and getting this well blown down because it had a leak in it. I had big trucks and pressure trucks, and I had men and crews out there helping me, and finally we just gave up. And we decided we could not kill this well by pumping water and stuff down it. And so Wednesday, I guess, or Thursday, I guess it was, I went down there by myself, and I thought, well, maybe that water over time, sometimes they'll kind of go on a vacuum, and you can work on them momentarily. Well, I get there. Certainly it had. It had a little pressure on it. I blew it down to the tanks, and it went down almost to zero, but it had about 15, 20 pounds on it, which doesn't sound like a lot, but on an oil or gas well, you got to be careful. So there's this valve inside of this wellhead, and I said, I'm going to open it up to the tank and relieve the pressure as best I can. I'm going to pull this valve out, put the new one in, done. I'll be done in 15 minutes. I took that valve out, and when I unscrewed it, it popped. It has had a little bit of pressure, enough pressure to blow this valve out of its last thread. And I realized I'm in trouble, because when you open a well up like that, eventually what water was in there is heading toward the surface. It's coming. It's coming with 3,000 pounds of pressure behind it probably. And once water starts coming, the water will blow for about 30 minutes, and then it's going to be straight gas blowing to the air at 2,000 pounds of pressure. So I'm nervous and I'm worried, and I start getting the valve and I try to put it in there. Well, I guess when that valve blew out, it messed up the starting thread. And I'm fighting this thing. I'm on the clock. And I'm sitting there and I'm fighting it, and I'm starting to get sweat dripping off of me, and I'm exhausted. I'm starting getting out of breath, and I go sit in the truck for a minute and I get some air, and I go back and I try it again, and my hands are getting sore because I'm trying to push and turn and shove and everything at the same time. And it wasn't happening. And the pressure's building, and it's spewing more and more, and I've got it all over my clothes and oil and water. And I just cried out to God. I said, I can't do it. I cannot do it by myself. Please, God, help me. I need you right now. Not tomorrow, not 30 minutes from now, right now. And that thing started, and it went right in, and I tightened it up, and it was over with. What could have been a disaster, catastrophe, turned into, a success. And I got in my truck, and I just thank God for being there, for helping me, because it would have been a total disaster. And I tell you this story because not that I think that I have some special connection with God, because I don't. And I don't think of God standing there right next to me or watching over me with his angels, but he did this week. And I needed him very much. And he helped me. And I'll never forget that moment. And God is that close to you. God is that close to every one of you. He is watching over us like a father who loves his children. He wants us to succeed. He doesn't want us to fail, and he's there for us, even though we think he's a million miles away at times. He is right there with us, and I don't know if I can use that as proof, but it certainly was proof for me. And I hope it is for you. So Jesus said, it is written, thou shalt not tempt the Lord your God. You don't tempt God, but when you call upon him, he's there to answer. Again, the devil takes him to an exceeding high mountain and shows him all the kingdoms of the world. I will give it all to you. And the Bible doesn't say, or even Jesus doesn't, he doesn't argue with Satan and say it's not yours to give. This is Satan's world. And you wonder where the evil comes from. You wonder why you and I are fighting. You wonder why those two people over there are fighting, or those group of people are fighting that group, or this nation against that group. Satan loves war. He loves debate. He loves high tension. He loves arguing and fighting and bickering. He loves division. He loves it. He does it in the world, and he does it in the church as well. He does. He loves it when we're fighting amongst each other. He's just so happy when we're all just up in arms with one another. So I thank God for every day that we have peace and tranquility, because anything other than that is, I believe, of Satan the devil. He said, I'll give it all to you. All these things I'll give you if you will fall down and just only worship me. And Jesus said unto him, get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. You want peace? You want prosperity? You want happiness? You want tranquility in your life? Then you start by serving God and obeying him and looking to him. There's so many other scriptures I could read here to you. It talks about Satan sows false doctrine among brethren. You remember the woman that was bent over for 18 years, and Jesus said she was bound by Satan 18 years. It wasn't something she did. It was something Satan did. He was the one that caused the problem. Jesus also called him a murderer and a liar, and he's the father of lies, that he entered into Judas personally and brought about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Paul and Barnabas, remember there were several times Paul said, I wanted to come to you, but Satan resisted me, wouldn't let me come. He put up a roadblock in front of me. And Paul also talked about the powers behind the throne. I want to look at that real quick. Acts the 13th chapter. When you see evil dictators in power, sometimes it's because Satan is right there in the midst. I call it the power behind the throne, if you will. Acts the 13th chapter, verse 6. And when they had gone through the isle of Paphos and found a certain sorcerer, a false prophet, a Jew, whose name was Bar-Jesus, and which was the deputy of a country, Sergius Paulus, a prudent man, who called Barnabas and Saul and desired to hear the word of God. Man wanted to hear God's word. But Elymas, the sorcerer, for so is his name by interpretation, withstood them, seeking to turn away the deputy from the faith. Then Saul, who also is called Paul, must have been very early in the ministry of the Apostle Paul, because he was called Saul. And now it said that, well, you remember Saul, but his name's Paul really now, so early in his ministry. Filled with the Holy Spirit, set his eyes upon him and said, O full of all subtlety. The same characteristic that he had when he talked to Eve. Subtlety. And all mischief, you child of the devil, you enemy of all righteousness. Will you not cease to pervert the right ways of the Lord? That's what's happening in our world out here. They're perverting the right ways of God. They're ignoring them. They're spitting on them. They're throwing them to the ground. They would love to burn them and get rid of every church congregation in our nation. Burn every Bible and every, thought of God out of our institutions. Just totally eradicate it, because that way no one can tell me what to do. I could go on and on here. I have several other scriptures I wanted to talk to you about. Peter, what Peter said, what James said, resist the devil. He said that, and Peter said, Satan is like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. James said, resist the devil and he will flee from you. You've got to put up, it talks about the armor of God to put it up against those temptations that come along. It talks about Satan, how he blinds the minds of the world, and he's transformed into an angel of light. He looks like a religious person. I know, I think it was Ken Hartberger had a post this week. It said, something like, what would it take to deceive the very elect? I mean, this guy is going to have a dynamic personality. He's going to know his Bible. He's probably going to know Greek and Hebrew, and he's probably going to be an expert in biblical law. He's probably going to know everything that you ever thought you knew about the Bible and more. And I had another thought this week. How in the world are they ever going to build a temple in Jerusalem when that Al-Aqsa Mosque is standing up there on top of that Temple Mount? I don't know why this thought's never occurred to me. What if they build the temple with the Dome of the Rock inside of it? Is that possible? Could he reunite all of these old religions under one roof? I don't know. I don't know where that thought come from. Never in my mind have I ever thought of anything. But when I looked at that stone in pictures, that they think it is the very stone on which Abraham offered Isaac, how would you protect such a biblically important artifact that's both with the Muslims and the Jews? How about we just build a temple that engulfs it all? Maybe that's how they do it. I don't know. That's just speculation completely on my part. Completely on my part. But I know that the ultimate power that is coming is in Revelation, the 13th chapter, where it talks about this, not only this beast power in the book of Revelation, but the false prophet that's going to have power where he controls this beast power. And he is going to be the one that says, I'll just sit. This beast power is actually going to be the one that says, I'll just sit in the temple of God claiming that I am God. That's what Paul said in Thessalonians. If we begin to understand where all the evil originates and stop blaming one another, then we might see clearly how to solve the divisions we have among us. If the Bible is true, and I say that it is, and it can identify the source of the world's woes, wouldn't it stand to reason that it can, on the positive side of the ledger, show us the right way to live in peace and harmony? It is something to ponder, I guess. The direction we're going right now is not working, is it? There must be another way. And I submit to you there is only one way that works. And it's not my way or any other man, but the way of God as defined in his book, in the Bible.